As a researcher who has spent decades immersed in the profound narratives and intricate philosophies of the Buddhist tradition, I have come to appreciate that the world's great stories often follow a deep, resonant pattern. They speak of a hero, called from an ordinary world into a domain of supernatural wonder, who faces fabulous forces and wins a decisive victory, returning from this mysterious adventure with the power to bestow boons on his fellow man. This archetypal pattern, what the great mythologist Joseph Campbell famously termed the monomyth, or the hero's journey, is the structural core of our most enduring legends. Yet, among all the heroes who have graced human history and mythology, there is one whose journey was not to a dragon's lair or a distant shore, but to the center of his own consciousness. His quest was not for a golden fleece or a holy grail, but for the very root of existence, for a definitive end to suffering itself. This hero was Siddhartha Gautama, the prince who became the Buddha. His life is perhaps the most complete and profound embodiment of the hero's journey ever told. It is an epic not of swords and sorcery, but of introspection and liberation. Its battles were fought on the silent field of the mind, and its prize was an elixir of pure wisdom, the Dharma. To trace the life of the Buddha through the lens of this archetypal journey is to unlock its deepest psychological and spiritual significance. It allows us to see his story not merely as the biography of a 5th century BCE Indian sage, but as a universal roadmap for human transformation. It is the story of how a man became a legend, and how that legend provides a timeless blueprint for the heroic potential that lies dormant within each of us. A Hero's Journey, The Life of Buddha. Part 1. The Ordinary World and the Call to Adventure. Every hero's journey begins in an ordinary world, a baseline reality from which they will eventually depart. For Prince Siddhartha, this world was anything but ordinary by our standards, yet it was the only reality he knew. Born into the ruling Shakya clan in the foothills of the Himalayas, his world was one of unimaginable opulence, meticulously crafted by his father, King Suddhodana, haunted by a prophecy that his son would become either a world-conquering monarch or a world-renouncing spiritual leader. The king was determined to steer him towards the former. He constructed a flawless, gilded cage. This was Siddhartha's ordinary world, 3 palaces, one for each season, filled with every conceivable pleasure. There were lotus ponds of blue, white, and red, the finest silks and perfumes, the most talented musicians and dancers. Crucially, it was a world hermetically sealed from the realities of the human condition. The king decreed that no sign of aging, sickness, or death should ever meet his son's eyes. The servants were all young and healthy. The palace gardens were manicured to remove even a single withered leaf, and any mention of sorrow was forbidden. Siddhartha was raised in a state of cultivated ignorance, a paradise designed to bind him to worldly life through the chains of pleasure and attachment. He mastered the arts of the warrior and the statesman, married the beautiful princess Yasodhara, and fathered a son, Rahula. By every external measure, he was the pinnacle of human success. But the hero's soul is never content with a gilded cage. Deep within the prince, a divine discontent, a spiritual restlessness known in Pali as samvega, began to stir. The fleeting nature of his pleasures left him with a sense of profound unease. He felt an unquenchable thirst to understand the true nature of the life he was living. This inner stirring was the first sign that the ordinary world, however perfect, was not enough. The hero was beginning to awaken. The call to adventure, for Siddhartha, did not come as a trumpet blast or a divine command, but as 4 quiet, devastating blows to his carefully constructed reality. At the age of 29, he persuaded his charioteer, Channa, to take him outside the palace walls. It was on these fateful excursions that the gods, as the legends say, ensured the call would be delivered. First, he saw an old man, his body bent and decrepit, leaning on a staff, having never witnessed advanced age. Siddhartha was profoundly shocked. Channa was forced to explain that aging is the inescapable fate of all beings, including the prince himself. This was the first crack in the armor of his blissful ignorance. On his second trip, he saw a sick man, his body covered in sores, writhing in pain. He learned of the reality of disease, a vulnerability that no wealth or status could prevent. The security of his own healthy body was shattered. On a third trip, he saw a corpse being carried to cremation.
mourned by a grieving family. For the first time, he confronted the stark, absolute finality of death. He realized that he, his wife, his child, everyone he loved, was destined for this same end. The pleasures of the palace now seemed like a grotesque charade, a frantic dance in a house already ablaze. These first three sights were the call in its most terrifying form, the presentation of an inescapable problem. The fundamental problem of dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactoriness. It was the fourth sight, however, that transformed the call from a cry of despair into a quest for a solution. He saw a wandering ascetic, a shramana, with a shaved head, a simple robe, and a look of profound peace and serenity on his face. In a world now defined by the horror of old age, sickness, and death, this man radiated an inner tranquility that seemed to transcend it all. Channa explained that this was a person who had renounced the world to seek a path beyond suffering. In that ascetic, Siddhartha saw not just a man, but a possibility. The call was now complete. The problem had been revealed, and the first glimmer of a path toward its solution had appeared. He knew, with an unshakable certainty, that he could no longer remain in the ordinary world of the palace. The journey had to begin. Part 2. Crossing the Threshold, the Seeker's Ordeal. The hero's journey proper begins when he crosses the threshold, leaving the known world behind and venturing into the unknown. For Siddhartha, this was the great renunciation, Mahabaniskramana, an act of breathtaking courage and sacrifice. The birth of his son, Rahula, which for most would be the ultimate bond to household life, was for him the final fetter. In the dead of night, he stole one last look at his sleeping wife and child, his heart aching with love and the pain of his departure. But his resolve was firm. He knew that the greatest gift he could ever give them was not his presence as a prince, but the discovery of a truth that could liberate them, and all beings, from suffering. He rode to the edge of the forest, where he cut off his long, princely hair with his sword and exchanged his royal robes for the simple rags of a mendicant. This act of shedding his former identity was his definitive crossing of the threshold. He had left behind his kingdom, his family, his wealth, and his name. He was no longer Prince Siddhartha, he was now the homeless seeker. Gautama. The world he entered was one of extreme spiritual trial, the stage of tests, allies, and enemies. His first tests involved seeking out the most renowned meditation masters of his day. These were his mentors. From Alara Kalama, he learned to achieve a state of deep concentration called the sphere of nothingness. Having quickly mastered it, he realized it was a temporary peace, not a permanent solution. From Uddaka Ramaputta, he mastered an even more refined state, the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. But again, his penetrating wisdom saw its limitation. These were sublime mental states, but they were conditioned and impermanent. They suppressed suffering but did not uproot its cause. He had exhausted the wisdom of his mentors and found it wanting. Now truly alone, he embarked upon his greatest ordeal. He was joined by 5 other ascetics, his first allies, who were impressed by his fierce determination. For 6 grueling years near the Niranjana River, he pushed the practice of extreme self-mortification to its absolute limit. This was the hero's descent into the abyss, a journey to the underworld of pain and deprivation. He ate almost nothing, withering away until his limbs were like dried reeds and his spine like a string of beads. He held his breath until he felt excruciating pressure in his skull. He endured scorching heat and biting cold, believing that by conquering the body, he could liberate the spirit. This was his ultimate test, a battle against the very limits of human endurance. But at the end of these 6 years, on the brink of death, he had a profound realization. Far from being enlightened, his mind was weak and clouded. He had tried the extreme of sensual indulgence in the palace and the extreme of self-punishment in the forest. And both had failed. The truth, he realized, must lie in a middle way, Majjhima Patipada, a path of balance that nourished the body just enough to support a strong, clear mind. This realization marked a critical turning point. He accepted a humble meal of milk rice from a village girl named Sujata. This simple act of self-care was a radical break from the ascetic tradition. His 5 allies, seeing this, were disgusted, believing he had given up the quest and reverted to a life of luxury. They abandoned him. This abandonment was a crucial part of his journey.
The hero must often face his final ordeal utterly alone. Part 3. The Inmost Cave and the Ultimate Boon. With his body regaining strength and his mind set on the middle way, the hero prepared to approach the inmost cave, the site of his final confrontation. For Gautama, this was a large pipal tree on the banks of the river. He made a seat of grass, sat in the lotus position, and made an unbreakable vow: let my skin, my sinews, and my bones wither away, let my flesh and blood dry up. But I will not rise from this seat until I have attained the supreme and final wisdom. This was the point of no return. Here, in the depths of his meditation, he faced his ordeal, the climactic battle against his ultimate enemy. This foe was not a physical dragon or a demonic king, but a far more powerful and insidious adversary, Mara. Mara is the personification of the hero's own internal demons, the embodiment of the very forces that bind all beings to the cycle of suffering, desire, aversion, doubt, fear, and, most fundamentally, the ego self. The battle with Mara is a profound psychological drama. First, Mara tried to lure him with desire, parading his beautiful daughters, craving, aversion, and lust before him. Gautama remained unmoved, his mind unshaken. Next, Mara unleashed an army of terrifying demons, representing fear and anger. They hurled weapons and mountains at him. But as they approached, his aura of loving kindness transformed them into harmless flowers. Finally, Mara launched his most powerful weapon, doubt. He challenged Gautama's right to sit on the seat of enlightenment. Who are you to claim this ultimate prize? Mara taunted. You are just a man. I am the lord of this world. There is no one here to bear witness to your worthiness. In this critical moment, Gautama did not engage in argument. Instead, in a gesture of sublime, silent confidence, he reached out his right hand and touched the earth. This is the famed Bhumisparsa Mudra, the earth-touching gesture. He was not calling upon a god, but upon the earth itself to bear witness to the countless lifetimes of virtue and accumulated merit that had brought him to this point. The earth, the legends say, roared its ascent, and Mara and his entire army vanished like a phantom. The dragon of the self had been slain, with his mind now perfectly still, clear, and unassailable. Gautama began the process of seizing the sword, of grasping the ultimate boon. Throughout the 3 watches of the night, his consciousness expanded to encompass the whole of reality. In the first watch, he gained knowledge of all his past lives. In the second, he gained the divine eye, seeing the karmic processes of all beings, how their actions lead to their rebirths. In the third watch, as the morning star rose, he penetrated the final truth. He saw the intricate chain of dependent origination, patikasamuppada, understanding precisely how ignorance leads to craving, and craving to suffering. And he saw how, with the cessation of ignorance, the entire chain unravels. He understood the 4 noble truths. In that instant, the last veils of ignorance dissolved. He was no longer Gautama the seeker. He had become the Buddha, the awakened one. He had attained Bodhi, enlightenment. He had seized the ultimate elixir of immortality, not a physical potion, but the deathless truth of the Dharma, the knowledge that liberates from the cycle of birth and death. Part 4. The Road Back and the Return. Winning the prize is not the end of the hero's journey. He must now undertake the road back and return the elixir to the ordinary world. This is often a perilous stage, and many heroes are reluctant to return. The Buddha was no exception. For weeks, he remained in the bliss of his newfound liberation, contemplating the profound depth of the Dharma he had discovered. It was, he thought, subtle, deep, hard to see, going against the stream of worldly craving. He hesitated, thinking, if I were to teach this Dharma, others would not understand, and that would be a weariness for me. This is the classic reluctance of the transformed hero, who knows the ordinary world cannot possibly comprehend the truth he now holds. The impetus for his return came from a divine intervention. The deity Brahma Sahampati appeared before him, imploring him to teach for the sake of those with little dust in their eyes. Out of his immeasurable compassion, the Buddha surveyed the world and saw that humanity was like a lotus pond. Some lotuses were stuck in the mud. Some were rising, and some were at the surface, ready to bloom. For the sake of those ready to bloom, he resolved to teach. The hero had accepted his mission to return. His return culminated in the stage of resurrection, where he re-enters the ordinary world. Now as a master of both the spiritual and material realms, the Buddha journeyed to the deer park at Sarnath to find his 5 former ascetic companions. They were his first audience. At first, they were skeptical, but his radiant presence and serene authority were undeniable. There, he delivered his first sermon, setting the wheel of Dharma in motion. He taught them the middle way and the 4 noble truths. As he spoke, one of the ascetics, Kandanya, gained the Dharma eye and became the first to awaken. The hero had successfully transmitted his boon. The elixir worked. This was his resurrection. He was no longer just the enlightened Gautama, but the Buddha, the incomparable teacher of gods and humans. He was now the master of 2 worlds, able to live in the world of conditioned phenomena, samsara, while being firmly rooted in the unconditioned reality of nirvana. The final stage, the return with the elixir, constituted the rest of his life. For 45 years, he walked the plains of India, tirelessly sharing the elixir of the Dharma with all who would listen. Regardless of their caste or station, he established the Sangha, the community of monks and nuns, to be the vessel that would carry this life-saving medicine through the ages. His entire ministry was the act of bringing the treasure he had won back for the benefit of all humanity. His final passing, the parinirvana, was the hero's ultimate dissolution. His mission complete, having left behind the immortal elixir of his teachings to guide all future heroes on their own journeys. Conclusion: the hero within. To view the life of the Buddha through the lens of the hero's journey is to see it as a powerful, archetypal drama of human potential. Siddhartha's story follows the monomyth's pattern with stunning precision, but it also elevates it. The kingdom he renounced was the world of sensory pleasure. The wilderness he entered was the landscape of the mind. The dragon he slew was his own ego. And the elixir he returned with was the timeless path to liberation. The Buddha's journey is heroic not because of a preordained destiny or divine intervention, but because of his profound humanity. He was a man who faced the fundamental truths of existence, who endured immense hardship, and who, through his own relentless effort, discipline, and wisdom, triumphed over the forces of ignorance that bind all living beings. His victory was not for himself alone. The ultimate expression of his heroism was his compassionate return, his 45-year commitment to sharing the path he had discovered. This framework reveals that the Buddha's life is not a story to be passively worshipped, but a call to action. It is a testament to the idea that the potential for such a heroic journey lies within each of us. The ordinary world is our life of habitual patterns and distractions. The call to adventure is that moment of profound questioning when we confront the reality of our own suffering and mortality. The threshold is the decision to commit to a path of inner cultivation. The ordeal is the confrontation with our own greed, hatred, and delusion, and the elixir is the wisdom and peace that come from that inner transformation. The Buddha's life remains the ultimate hero's journey because the boon he brought back is universal and eternal. The Dharma is a living path, a guide for anyone willing to undertake the courageous journey inward, to face their own Mara, and to discover the awakened hero that lies waiting within.